Hey everybody, welcome to Focus Interviews. The BCM is excited to provide this opportunity to sit down with local leaders and hear from them about how Christ makes a difference in their daily life and how their faith impacts their living every single week where they are. We're going to hear from University of Memphis coaches, the athletic director, ministry leaders, business professionals, and more. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope you really enjoy what you hear. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Oh my goodness. Oh, sound check. 1, 2. Is this thing on? Jeff, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
depends on where I put my earplugs.
Yeah, well, last time you had the L and the R mixed up, but that's okay. What's going on, podcasters, podcast world, whatever you call it? My name is Weston Downing.
I'm Jeff Jones.
Jeff Jones. I know what you're thinking if you're listening to this. You're probably wondering, Weston, didn't you have a podcast last year where you did 8 episodes and we haven't heard from you since then? Yes, I did. You were correct. But we are back, and we're going to share with you what is going on. As you have noticed, we have renamed the podcast to The Long Run Podcast. Little new name there. We've done a little bit of rebranding, but we've got a new vision. We've got a great mission we're on and a new name, and we were excited. But enough about that. I have a new co-host, host, whatever your title is on here. I don't know, but you were expensive to get here is all I know.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell the world who's listening about yourself, Jeff.
Okay, I'm Jeff Jones. I'm the campus minister at the University of Memphis. I work specifically at the Baptist Collegiate Ministry. It's a campus ministry that is located right here on the University of Memphis campus. And I have a wife, Jan, and 4 kids, Emily, Caleb, Ellie, and Inslee. And we live right here in the Bartlett, Tennessee area, right outside of Memphis.
I hate when people say outside of Memphis. Bartlett, Tennessee's in Memphis. People don't get that, but that's okay.
Our address is actually Memphis, but who's counting?
I saw that you brought a prop into the studio for
this. Yeah, man. I'm really concerned about these things, and honestly, because I'm a Memphis fan, this is the only orange you'll ever see in our building. We've basically, banned the color orange. Not to say anything about our friends from the rest of the state, but.
Right.
We've just got to be loyal here. But this is for disinfecting purposes. We've disinfected the table.
For those of you who can't see it, he is holding, which I'm holding right now, is a big bottle, can, whatever this, what would be the correct word for this?
Canister, maybe?
A big canister, a big orange canister of disinfecting wipes. I went over there and touched his headphones earlier, and he just wiped them all down. I was like, okay, Jeff. Because it gets rid of 99.9% of bacteria in 15 seconds. But yeah, only orange that we have in this building because we are the University of Memphis.
Go blue.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. That's right.
Yeah. So, Jeff, the new name, the Long Run Podcast. That, and then also we have a big group of students and young adults listening from the University of Memphis Baptist Collegiate Ministry. This is actually replacing the Thursday night worship called Focus, these podcast episodes. So shout out to that group of people.
Hey.
And shout out to the Memphis BCM and yourself for letting us record in here right now. It's nice. It's nice not having to be in my attic like last year.
Glad to make it happen.
But tell us, where did the name come from? Share with us our vision here.
Well, basically, when you think about the long run, you hear that phrase a lot when people talk about, hey, you're in this for the long run. Somebody might get married and they're thinking, hey, we're together, we're in this for the long run, or anything like that. And that concept is that we realize that young adults make a lot of decisions while they're in this age group of college students, and before and after. And so what we want to make sure that we challenge young people, young adults, to think about the decisions they make in light of the long run. We realize that many students who come to school here will actually decide before they leave here who they're going to marry, what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, and how their lives are going to be lived. So it's sort of a crossroads. It's like where they're making a major decision or major decisions, and we want them to make those decisions through the lens of Jesus Christ in a relationship with Him, with His values, His vision, His purpose, as they know him and as they love him and as they pursue him, then they'll have a life that will last for the long run for the purposes of God's kingdom.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm excited about this podcast and everything that we've got going on in the vision there that you just brought up, because the vision is to challenge young adults to know, love, and pursue Jesus, and through that lens, helping make decisions in their life, not so they can have a better life. Because as we know, some Christians, you know, they may say, well, God has a wonderful plan for your life, but I saw a book recently and it had that title, and the front page was Stephen getting stoned. It's like, God has a wonderful plan for you, but his wonderful plan is for you to know him, to be with him. And that's not so we can just have a comfortable life.
Exactly.
It may look like that, but so we're excited. It's a lot of big things going on.
Sure.
And I think it's awesome. I mean, I think about my college career, and even if you're not in college, you're listening to this and you're working, you're still making these same big decisions, whether, you know, what jobs you have, where you're living, are you staying at home? We go through countless decisions as young adults, and like you said, we're at a pivotal crossroads. And you brought something up the other day about trajectory or something. Do you remember what you said about that?
Yeah, it's just basically this, is that if I decide I'm going to go to a location in the city of Memphis, for instance, maybe even on campus, just a mile away or something, and I set out and I know exactly where that compass is leading, and I know if I'm going to follow this, you know, direction to go to where I'm headed, then I'm going to actually need to go straight there. But if I just adjust my course even a half of an inch at the beginning, at the end I'll be way off, because I'm making a decision here before I leave on my journey there that will affect where I end up a mile later. I'll be so far off, and I of course don't have all the concepts of percentages and so on, but the truth is this, is a lot of people think that, hey, as long as I'm a Christian, I'm good.
Right.
I'm a Christian and that sort of settles it, so I can live my life then and hope God will bless what I'm doing. But the trajectory of your life is totally off if you're not constantly following the compass of Jesus' direction for your life and what he's called you to do. So, you know, you can't really follow him unless you know him. And the more you know him, the more you love him. And then the more you love him, the more you want to pursue him. And when you're pursuing him, your life will be not perfect, but it will be where it needs to be, because you're actually following Jesus. You're not just making decisions and hoping that Jesus blesses where you're headed, you know?
That's exactly right.
So,
and that's, you know, I think about that as you're talking about that. I think back to, we went to a thing in Panama City called Beach Reach. And what it was about 400 college students from Kentucky to Georgia, from everywhere. Met a lot of good people down there, but we had the opportunity to go out and do street evangelism. And I remember I was walking out there, I was like, okay, well, this will be about as pleasant as a root canal, I guess. I heard that from somewhere about evangelism, but so many people, we think about that and they're just living this life, you know, focused on the world. And we know that because maybe most of the people that are listening to this podcast are Christians. But, you know, the gospel is for you to be saved. You hear it, you believe it, you accept it, confess that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart, and you will be saved.
Yeah.
But it's just as much power to us as the believers, because it's the why behind what we're doing. It's the hope for the future, that Jesus did come live on this this world 2,000 years ago. He lived a perfect life so he could actually pay our sin debt on the cross. As he was on the cross, he yielded as finished, meaning our debt has been paid. He was buried in a tomb for 3 days to prove he was dead, and he busted out of that grave, defeating death altogether. And so that's why we're here recording this podcast. Yeah. Not so, well, I'm doing it so I can be seen, but maybe not you, Jeff, because you're so you're humble.
No, I don't want to be seen. You know, it's not as appealing as you, Weston.
Well, but, Jeff, just to call you out for a second. Prior to this, the camera was kind of crooked behind me, and he said, "Are you going to put that camera on me?" I was like, "Oh, do you not want to be on camera?" He goes, "No, I mean, I like the camera a little bit."
Sure. It helps me realize that somebody's out there watching. You know,
that's exactly right. But we think about that, like you said, to know Jesus, and then moving forward to love him. And I did not really understand that concept of loving Jesus until about 2 years ago, because we throw around the word love.
Sure.
I love Xbox. I love McDonald's. I love candy. I love hanging out. I love everything.
Yeah.
We use the same word. I read a book, Bob Goff. Have you heard of him? He's everything out of his books you can just about quote. And he had a quote in there. He said, love is two things. It's sacrifice and commitment.
Sure.
And I know there's some people from my family group listening to this, because I say it every week. And somebody had a good question for me a few weeks ago. They said, well, if love is sacrifice and commitment, why have to sacrifice and commit to a job I don't like? Doesn't mean I love it, though. I was like, well, that's a good point. Well, sacrifice and commitment isn't always love. But if love doesn't have sacrifice and commitment,
it's not really love.
Right.
Yeah.
If that love and that desire doesn't birth into action,
yeah,
is it really love? So when you take about that and you say love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, if it's not birthing into action, faith without works is dead.
Sure.
And you can be a Christian, and I'm not talking about, oh, you're this lukewarm person, but you can be this person that you're serving, but you just maybe God feels far.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not spending as much time. It just doesn't feel real anymore.
Yeah.
Your doubts are starting to accumulate, and you have to come back to the first love. You don't have to be this prodigal son that has to return and everything.
Yeah.
But
well, and I think that's what I love, is to see the stories of different people who have experienced seasons of discovery and also seasons of difficulty and struggling and all that kind of stuff. And I think some of what we're even trying to do in this is we're going to have different people who are going to come and actually be interviewed, and some of them are going to be here that have gone through difficulty. Some of them are far from God at one point, and now they're close to God. And so it's going to be interesting to see, as we interview these people, what that's going to be like, and how God's love and his will has played out in their life for us to all see. So,
and I love it too, because that was initially your idea. My idea was, when we were talking about this whole, I was wanting to bring back the podcast. I was like, I got to get Jeff Jones in there. He's got stuff to say. I got to get Jeff Jones. Now I've got Jeff Jones and Jeff's friends, just with people And it's good, though, because for people my age, we need to hear experience.
Sure.
Need to hear some wisdom spoken, because you really don't hear it unless you're in these other guys' worlds. But your idea is cool. Our idea, whatever you call it, because you're just giving them a voice. Yeah. Because we got people listening, and so I'm excited.
Yeah, and I think some of the people that are coming that are interesting right now, we know a few that are coaches at the University of Memphis that'll be coming and sharing, and then we have Soup Campbell, who's agreed to come. We don't know exactly when, but we've got several folks who are going to be here and share with us the rest of this semester for sure, but also hopefully we'll continue with that. It'll be a great encouragement to students who are part of the BCM, but also other people, we hope, as the days go on.
For sure. And it's, this kind of got sped up. Obviously, I was talking about a podcast idea, and then when we were at the beach together is when this COVID-19 coronavirus started circling around. And then I was like, I've heard a little bit about it. And I was like, okay, I'm not watching the news or anything. I remember we came in one day, I was like, okay, they're canceling championship games and March Madness. And I'm like, okay, this is getting serious. I was like, either this is a big joke, you know what I mean, or this is serious. I mean, because when you cancel sports, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is, sure. And then you hear that school's actually going online the rest of the semester. It changes everything, yeah.
Right.
And so what's happened with that is, you think about it, how has COVID-19 or coronavirus affected you specifically? What is, for instance, for you, Weston, is your life a lot different?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm at the house a lot more.
Yeah.
And I don't go to the gym anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't change because I didn't go to the gym before. So.
Yeah, that's affected me a lot for sure. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. That's sarcasm.
But I'm stuck in the house all day. I think about you too, like ministry wise. Like, your life, your job is here to minister to students, and it's like, okay, campus is closed, and it's like, well, what are you supposed to do? Just say, see you in August?
Yeah, yeah.
People are not going to work.
Right. And I think that was the question to a lot of people. And even as we've moved into what has now been, we have a whole stay-at-home directive that's come from our city. and municipality governments. And so we're saying, hey, you've got to stay at home and don't go out for at least 14 days if at all possible, unless it's essential that you're there. And I think about, for instance, a lot of churches and ministries, they're saying, how do we move forward with this? And so, there are different people who've done different things, and I think it's been interesting for me because I've talked to a lot of pastors and a lot of folks on church staffs and in ministries about, how are you guys approaching this, and what are you doing to adjust your ministry? And some churches are just trying to stay, they're trying to survive, and rightly so. Just trying to say, how do we bridge this problem and get out on the other side? And then other churches are creating new avenues and adjusting. And I think it's a personal thing too, is a lot of times we're thinking, well, I wonder what everybody else is going to do. But I think we even have to say, what am I going to do to make sure that my life has value and purpose during this time? Because I think the first thing that came over in my mind, and I don't know if this is true for you, but was like, man, I don't know, what do we do? Do we just close down and
Right.
I just go sit at home and watch Netflix, or
I was just thinking the
what?
same thing.
What are you going to do? And I think a lot of students maybe, and a lot of young adults and people who their job got closed down or whatever, they're saying, well, I don't have anything to do. And so I think that's some of what I think we want to talk about today is,
Right.
okay, we're in the situation. What do we need to do? Well, first of all, we need to follow what the government has told us to do. We need to stay at home as much as is possible. We need to, keep from affecting other people. And I think, you mentioned something earlier about young people, and
40%.
40% are what? What was the?
So the statistic in Shelby County area, which is the county that Memphis is in, it's the majority age range, the top age range, 40% of is actually that are carrying the virus and that has the virus is 21 to 35-year-olds or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I could barely get that statistic out of my mouth.
No, I understand. Yeah. But it's saying that you guys, that age range is most likely to have it.
Right.
But also least likely to be, long-term affected by it, but definitely transfer it.
Right.
And so there are people, our grandparents and our moms and dads and other people in the community who could be affected by it, and it would turn into something more. And even if it goes into a selfish mode, is that you're thinking, well, I'm never going to be able to graduate, or I'm not going to be able to finish school, or I'm not going to be able to work. But the longer we stay out there and keep living like we have been living, the longer the virus continues. So it's just use wisdom in that. But I don't think that's really what we're trying to talk about here today.
That's true. Obviously, some thoughts. It's overwhelming, to say the least. It's overwhelming, but even though you're just still at home, because now you find yourself in going from a routine. Okay, I get up in the morning, I wake up, shower, read my Bible, go to school, go to class, bounce, see people. Now it's like, okay, I'm home. There's a TV in front of me, and it's like, and a remote. And why does that remote keep looking like it's getting closer? And I need to watch those things. But, I mean, we've looked at Scripture. You've got some Scriptures here that tell us what our main agenda needs to be. Well, not necessarily main agenda, but the thought that we need to keep that hovers over this season and this time that we're in.
Sure. Well, just a few of them, and I have them down here on this paper, but, it's sort of a progression. When you look at Scripture, it talks to us about so many different topics, but in this one, these verses we've sort of identified. Psalm 90, verse 12 would be a great verse just for anybody to remember and to underline and look up in Scripture and put it in their heart. But it says this: teach us to count our days so that we may get a heart of wisdom. And, it's basically number your days, count your days. And I think it's not just saying, hey, count as in like keep a calendar, but I think it's saying really, make the best use of your days, because your days are limited on this earth. There's even verses that say things like, hey, there's a time for everything under the sun in Ecclesiastes, but it's basically saying, teach us, Lord, to count our days so that we can gain wisdom. And so I think the person who doesn't count their days, or the person who doesn't use their days for the best uses, then they end up not being wise.
Right.
There's a guy named Chris Rice who wrote a song a long time ago, and if he's out there somewhere, hi Chris. I went to college with Chris, but he wrote a song that says, "Teach us to count our days, and teach us to make our days count." And I think that's an important tool for us to understand. There's another verse. You want to read that, Ephesians 5?
Yeah, Ephesians 5:15 through 16. It says, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil."
Mm. You know, as you look at that verse, it tells us, hey, we need to be wise in how we walk. Every step. You know, when you're out walking, you look for things. I walked this week with my wife and my daughter at one point, and there's a lot of place because of the rain that mud had sort of piled up, and so we had to be careful where we walked. We were watching where we were going. We were counting our steps in some sense. And I think sometimes what we do is we just aimlessly go through life and we don't count we're not careful how we walk. We need to be wise. And I love that Scripture says, make the best use of the time because the days are evil. In other words, you know, right now we are in a situation that I heard someone describe recently is that it's like a war. Mm-hmm. Is that there's not been anything comparable for us in this current generation besides 9/11, and even that didn't affect us nationwide in the same way since World War II. You know, World War II, there were rations and things like that. You couldn't get certain things because of just all the supply and demand and so on. Well, now we're in a situation like where the days are evil. We need to make the best use of our time.
Right.
And then the last verse that we're going to look at is Colossians 4, 5, and 6, and it's got a different perspective. And it said, why don't you read that too?
Colossians 4, 5 through 6, it says, "Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person."
Yeah. If you see the progression, I mean, the first one is count your days, make your days count. The second one is make the best use of your time because the days are evil. But the third one says be wise in how you use your time toward people outside the faith. And it could be people outside your family, it could be people outside your community, or it could be really more specifically outside the Christian faith. Is we need to be wise. We need to be wise in how we speak to them. We need to be wise in how we use our time. And so we've got a few things here that we're going to talk about related to those verses about making our days count, making our life count.
Because, you know, like I said, we found ourselves in this weird funk. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it a minute ago that this is probably the most substantial thing that's happened since 9/11. Not just, I mean, you can say impact, but the cure that we're trying to implement is just as I don't want to say the word dangerous, but it's just as substantial as how it's affecting every life of American. Because we're looking, I mean, I see a lot of college students, you know, not much has changed. We're not working and stuff like that. Finances are getting tight. But for a lot of people, 401ks are going down. Like, this is serious stuff that's happening. And I remember we were at Beach Reach when all this was going on. I came out of the room there talking about they're shutting down NCAA and this. I was like, oh, my goodness. I was like, no basketball? And I wasn't really joking when I said it. It could have came off that way. I was like, this might be the biggest thing that happened since 9/11. And they kind of looked at me like I was making a crude joke. And I shook it off. I was like, nah, I'm serious. I haven't – when's the last time they're canceling college basketball?
Right.
Like, really, like coming up on March Madness. It's like, nah. And so we find ourselves in this funk, waking up in every day, and it's like, how are we going to plan our day, and what tips do we have here? What's the first one we got here?
So here's what they all start with P. That'll help you.
Perfect.
So the first one is power your day. And, you know, when I think of power your day, I think about a car that starts. Just because a car starts doesn't mean it's going anywhere yet, but you need something to start your day that powers your day every day. So I think that has to do with when you get up, why you get up, how you get up, and with what you use. You know, whether it could be things like, I don't know how you power your day, but like coffee sometimes helps start your day.
Right, shower. I'll take a shower.
Yeah, power shower. You know,
look at you.
There we go.
So clever.
Sorry, I can't help it.
You never stops.
I don't. It's ignition. It's the thing that really sort of kicks off your day. And some people, they get up and they go run the first thing, or they get up and they drink coffee and they sit down with God's word. And I think that's part of the start of your day is you try to find a way to kick that day off on purpose. Don't just wake up. A lot of people at this stage especially are just going to sort of go, I'm going to roll out of bed whenever it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is they miss a lot of significant productive aspects of their day because they don't even start their day.
Right.
They just sort of accidentally fall into it, when they get out of bed.
Because the morning is some of the most productive time that you have
Sure.
before lunch.
It can be.
And whether it's like that big project you want to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I've read and listened to a bunch of productivity people, for people that work at home, that run their own business, entrepreneurs, business owners, because you have to be this self-starter.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hold yourself accountable. Like, you have to do your bills. You have to do the
Mm-hmm.
projects. You got to do everything from bookkeeping to the actual service or the product that you're providing.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you going to do that?
Right.
Especially if you like staying up late and,
Yeah.
you're rolling out of the bed late. And so, yeah, powering your day is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is how it could be that your alarm, or it could be music. It could be anything that just sort of gets your day going. But it's important that that's the case. And then it's not by accident. It's on purpose. Start your day. When you get in the car, you don't turn your key accidentally. It has to happen. The second thing would be that after you start your day, you really want to give a plan to your
Right.
day. And you could do this the night before, or you could do it after you power your day. But regardless, planning your day is important. I don't know. How do you plan your day? Typically, Weston.
I'm a big planner, and I
Yeah.
can be an over planner.
Mm-hmm.
Planning is good, but letting it flow and do what you need to do. Type
flexible, sure.
That's
Yeah.
the word I'm looking for. You
Yeah.
need to be flexible, and with anything, keeping this simple. And I've liked how you've kept this simple. But how I personally plan my day is I'm thinking just before lunch, what am I trying to get done?
Yeah.
Because I know once I eat lunch, depending what I eat, if I go and get takeout, it makes me feel bad. I'm sleepy. I'm less
Yeah.
productive. I may push meetings and stuff for phone calls and stuff to the afternoon.
Yeah.
But planning my day, I'm trying to get in the Word first thing, and we've all heard that. But I'm trying to get into the Word the first thing. Knock out that to-do list is what I have every day, because if it ain't on the list, I'm going to forget.
Sure.
Even if it's a small thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to write it down or have it. You may do it digitally. There's a thing that called pen and paper that people used to use. Yeah, it's sort of like I've heard that people are actually writing notes again and stuff like that. It's amazing. But
That's weird.
yeah, I know. It's crazy, and you actually take time to write down what your day is going to be about. And what that does is that just gives purpose to your day. It really does. If you plan it, now it may be another BCM director in our state said this recently. He said that he'll take his day and segment it into 3 sections. And he'll identify what he's going to do in the morning, what he's going to do in the afternoon, what he's going to do in the evening. And so it's really good when that's the case. You segment it that way, or segment it into hours if you need a little more structure. And especially if you have projects due for school and things like that, it's important to plan your day. So power your day, plan your day.
Right. And then we have prioritize
Yeah.
things that matter the most to you.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is work you have to get done. If you're a college student or a young adult, you got stuff you need to work on at your house. If you're living outside your parents' house, or your parents making you do chores.
Yeah.
Well, you probably need to move out. Or you got work you need to go to. You got things that you got to do home from work. You've got schoolwork because it's all online now. You need to prioritize these things. Really
Sure.
ask yourself what matters the most.
Mhm.
And of course, we're Christians. We're followers of Christ, and we're going to tell you to read your Bible in the morning. That's what you need to do. But we need to take this seriously, because reading the Bible, praying, these spiritual disciplines, when we think about disciplines, these are things. We'll take prayer, we'll take Bible reading in the morning. These are things that, they're not always the most fun thing to do.
Right.
That's why they're a discipline.
That's exactly right.
I read an article about prayer, and it was like, I've heard, the guy said in the article, I heard some people speak and they talk about prayer, and it makes it sound like angels are descending upon them as they pray. But I think I've about figured out that angels are always descending upon them, is what they think. But it's a discipline, and
Sure.
it's hard. And I
Yeah.
remember Dave Ramsey wrote a book called EntreLeadership for business owners, entrepreneurs. And he started breaking down these things, when we think about our day, into 4 categories, all dealing with 2 things, importance and urgency. And I was thinking about this as I was driving today. number one, when we think about prioritizing your day, he calls them quadrants. Quadrant
4
one.
quadrants, yeah.
Quadrant one, they are urgent and important. These are things you got to do to keep the lights on. What is your main priority? I mean, your work that you have to do. These are things like do your schoolwork, go to work, work from home. Quadrant two are the things that are important, but they're not urgent.
Right.
Those are the ones that sneak up on you. Working out, you haven't worked out, or you're eating terrible. Next thing you know, you're having open heart surgery. And it's like, well, these are things that are important, but they're not pressing. Spiritual disciplines, they're important, but they're not pressing. It's 3 days and you haven't read your Bible, and you're like, what have I been doing? You just, why does God, why do you feel far?
Right.
I said, well, dummy, you haven't been talking to me. I haven't. What's the joke? God hasn't moved.
Yeah.
Quadrant three, which are things that are urgent, but they're not important. And what's a good example of urgent but not important? Well, a cell phone.
Yeah.
Because you're nonstop getting notification. You're getting texts. You're getting Instagram notifications for somebody that commented on your picture 2 weeks ago because they're stalking your profile. How do these things matter? And they're distracting us.
Yeah.
And then the last quadrant are things that are not important and not urgent.
Yeah.
TV, all these other things that do not matter in the middle of the day when you're trying to get stuff done.
And it's balancing all those things, trying to figure out which one is like you said, is urgent, is important, but not urgent. If we work on those from that quadrant mostly, and we prioritize those things, then that actually helps our day run smoother. And I think it's important to notice, think about in your spiritual, if you were to identify, there's things every day that you can do that can help your spiritual health. There's things every day that can help your mental health. There's things every day that can help your physical health,
Right.
and things that can help your emotional health. And, when I think about mental, I think, we need to set some goals to read a book, or we need to set goals of exercising, or we need to set goals of time alone with the Lord and maybe memorizing scripture or spiritual disciplines. And as we do that, that gives us growth in the things that we prioritize. So obviously our most prioritized thing is our relationship with Christ. And then the next thing would be people. What are we doing to grow closer to Jesus? What are we doing to grow closer to people? So, and then I think after you prioritize those things and sort of take time every day to identify how to grow in those areas, at the end of your day, I think you ponder. So we've got, I know it's all cheesy, but it's power your day, plan your day, prioritize your day and the things you're doing that day, and then ponder on your day, reflect on it. And I think journaling is important. I think it's something that we ought to consider doing in our lives, even if it means we write down some of the stuff we plan and then identify how those things have gone. But it helps you to think, how have I spent my day? Have I been productive today? Have I been doing things that make the most of the time that I have? Those are the questions we need to ask. And it relates back to those verses. And maybe you write those verses and put them on your mirror in your bathroom, is how to make the most of your time.
Right. And I've got a scripture that came to mind while you were mentioning prioritize, and we need to ponder our day, because we got to remember Jesus is the reason for it all. And like I said, we're Christians. You're going to hear this stuff all the time. But what does this relationship with Christ really mean to you? You've heard the term. It's not a religion. It's a relationship. You can be saved, but if you're not choosing to know Christ deeper and just move forward into this intimate relationship with you, it's really, what are you doing? And John 15:4 says, "Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me." And I think it adds later, apart from me, you can do nothing. And that's something we got to remember in this time.
And here's one of the things that I just wrote down as a reminder to me, is that if you want peace and confidence in your life right now, because a lot of people are concerned about peace in this storm, and they're not very confident about things. And so if you want peace and confidence, I think if you don't have purpose and productivity in your life, in the way that you're living, then you're not going to find those things. You're not going to find peace. You're not going to find confidence, because you're not being productive in your life and you're not being purposeful in your living. So try to do that, because the opposite of that is procrastination and pointless activities. They produce anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Here's the biggest concern I have, is that we're already in a culture where anxiety is overwhelming. And it doesn't mean that it's always related to this only, but I think a lot of young adults are going through anxiety because they spend so much time with noise and so much time with self-involved aspects of living. They're not thinking about anybody else. They're not thinking about how they can impact the world. They're thinking how they can get ahead, or they're thinking how they can meet their needs or survive. And anxiety is a direct result of not being productive and not being on purpose in the way we live. Again, there are exceptions to that, and I don't ever want to underestimate those exceptions. People have disorders and struggle with anxiety,
Right.
and I understand that. But I believe, honestly, we can help ourselves if we power our day, if we plan our day, if we prioritize our day and practice disciplines in our faith especially,
Right.
and then take time to reflect on every day and how we use it. If we do those 4 things every single day, this time of being at home and being in a weird situation, I think it'll change what we're doing.
Right. An interesting thought that came to my mind is we take a step back and we look at this whole thing culturally and socially. Let's take a step back and put it in reverse, and we go and look at, I'll think about a time, the 1950s, when my grandmother was growing up. And my grandmother, she tells me all the time, it's funny hearing the stories. She used to pick cotton. My grandfather worked in the sawmill, and they grew up in eastern Arkansas. I'll say it, there was nothing out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's like, what's going on? And I think about, what if they were to hear what we were talking about today?
Yeah.
What if some people back then would have heard what we're like discussing here? Like, we've got this plan, so we just don't freak out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, they probably call us soft.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. We live in a society and a culture now where everything is at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Technology has really amplified a lot of these things that, like you said, we live in noise. We
Right.
live in distraction. And I think about them, and she tells me everything her dad could do. Her dad could, I think, play the violin, cut hair. Like, he could do everything. And I saw their house over
Yeah.
there like a year or two ago where they grew up, and there's nothing out there.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're living in the time there probably that we're living in here. Yes, they could go to town and stuff. I'm like, we can't even leave our house hardly.
Right.
But it's different, and we find ourselves, we just need to be prepared because of the
Sure.
society and culture we live in. That was my point. But
Well, and I think, as I was talking about churches earlier, is that I remember there's a church here in town. I talked to their pastor. It's Brinkley Heights, and they have a ministry called Street Reach that basically is in the community that they live in that Brinkley Heights community, and they actually minister to kids in the inner city, and they have an academy. And I thought, wow, everything that they have is probably shutting down. So when I talked to Tim on the phone, the pastor there, they've ramped up what they're doing. Because they're saying, hey, because there's great need in this community, and because of this situation, we're trying to figure out how we can meet those needs now in a different way. Mm-hmm. As opposed to them saying, we've just got to figure out how to stay alive. They're saying, we're adding this, and our teachers at our academy are going into these homes, or dropping off supplies, and they're making calls, and they're doing this, and we're feeding people, and we're opening this, and we're doing this, and they're still abiding by the regulations around. But what they're doing is they're actually increasing ministry during this time, increasing relationships. And one other pastor told me this. They said, sometimes we're so dependent on programs that when something like this happens, we have to really identify what is it that we're about as a church, as a ministry, as Christians. Mm-hmm. And I think this is causing us to really evaluate, how do we spend our time? Is it dependent on whether our church has an activity, or dependent on whether the BCM is, having a fellowship, or whatever you want to call it, as to whether I'll be involved in walking the Christian life? Is it dependent on whether or not I am around people who are just like this, source for me, or is it because I'm plugged into my relationship with Christ, and then in community I can do that with other people, whether it be through Zoom or phone calls? Those are things that are relatively new, it seems like, but it's actually what's most important. Right. It's what fuels us.
So how many weeks have we been outside of a congregational meeting of church? Has it been a little over a week already?
Yeah, it's most churches have done it twice.
Right.
Some have just done it once, but people are trying to adjust depending on their circumstances, and some of them are smaller churches and older churches, and some of them are larger churches with more resources. But I love how everybody's pooling together and working together and sharing resources. It's really cool.
We're going to be getting to see, think about it, a month from now, and people that sit at home like, well, I haven't done anything with church in a month. And something that you said you've told your kids is what about the building?
Yeah. It's the church is not the building. Right. We can drive by a church and see the building, and they, I say, is that a church? This is when they were younger. They roll their eyes now if I were to say that. But I'd say, is that a church? And they'd go, yeah. And I said, no, it's not. The church is the people. And the people, obviously everybody talks about that right now. I've seen, pictures and memes and things like that about that. But, really that's the truth. Mm-hmm. And so one church actually I talked to today, one pastor told me that what they've done is they sent out their church directory to their members. And what they said is, you take the 5 people on the list below you and you call them and check on them every week and pray with them.
Wow.
I thought, that's the church. That's the
right.
church. It's
and
calling and talking and listening and praying and loving and asking their story. What's your story? How did you come to know Christ? I want to know. That's the church.
And it's this virus and this situation that we're in has forced us to do that. And it's kind of sad. Because I'm not looking at other churches that I don't go to. I'm looking at myself.
Yeah.
I have a family group. Mm-hmm. It's like, am I calling these people throughout the week? Am I checking? Because now I have no choice, because it's the only way I'm going. Unless I make an effort, I'm not going to see them. You know what I mean?
You can't just put it out there. You have to actually connect with people for sure.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just when you see them in walking or passing or whatever.
Yeah. I think too, it's it's practice for the persecuted church. If you want to know what the persecuted church, how they exist, this is probably it.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Obviously not exactly, but in a lot of ways. So I think it's really good. And there's some tips that we have just, related to what we've just talked about that I think are important. Tips to help others in this is, think about ways that you can serve people. There could be people in your community, in your neighborhood, close to you, that you could just even, take something to their house if they need it, check on them, share your supplies with them. That's where we get energy, and I think, and I don't want to sound new age, it's not energy like that, but like I think as we share and serve, it actually brings to us encouragement. Even though we're ministering to other people, it ministers to us too. I not joke, but I think it's funny that every system that we have in our body, whether it's the respiratory or the digestive or the circulatory, all those systems typically, even our skin, grows new cells and then sheds old cells or dead cells. We have breathe in oxygen, we breathe out. What is it we breathe out?
CO2.
CO2, yeah, carbon dioxide. Yeah, I'm not a scientist, but I know some things.
I'm glad I answered it right.
I think that's right. Carbon dioxide is the thing you don't want in your house, right? Yeah, okay. It doesn't
comes from
matter.
the car, right?
Yeah. So
it'll kill you.
That's exhaust, though, and that's funny because what we're talking about here is that if all we do as believers is take in, and we don't have a system of exhaust, as in helping others or serving others, then we become unhealthy. And I think in this time, that's what we need to think about, is how we can serve other people so that we grow through this. And so if all we're doing is going, oh, me, I'm so sad because, it's either Eeyore or Tigger. One of the two is you're gonna be one of those two.
That's funny.
You're gonna be the guy that goes, oh my word, I've got a house, but the roof fell in, or whatever. Versus Tigger, who's like excited to see everybody and serving. It doesn't mean you have to have a personality that's different than what you have, but it means that you're looking to serve other people.
Right.
So
that's good. Well, that's a lot of things we talked about today. Mm-hmm. So I would say, kind of for those of you who are listening and going out there, we talked about everything from how to plan your day so laziness doesn't defeat you and procrastination doesn't lead to pointless activities, as you said. We talked about, the vision of this podcast, knowing, loving, and pursuing Christ. And we talked about all of this and how it ties together in the midst of COVID-19 being out there. Mm-hmm. Just, I'd hate to just say that this COVID-19, the coronavirus, is opportunity, because like I said, it's it's a big deal, and a lot of people are hurting from it, and it's scary. You know what I mean? I think about my grandparents. I mean, to quote my mother, who's a nurse. If you go see them, you wash your feet, you wash your hands, you just go take a shower, and then so it's dangerous. But as we walk away, what would you say is a challenge for people listening?
Well, for me, I think about exactly what you said, is that when you think about this situation, a lot of us are going, this is a terrible thing. And somebody said this recently. I read this somewhere, probably on social media, but I read this where somebody said, what are we going to say? Well, we're going to say, as adults who lived through this, we're going to say this was a catastrophe. It was terrible. It was like we were kept away and all this kind of stuff. But what are the 8-year-olds that are living right now going to say? They're going to say, man, it was the coolest thing ever. We got to stay home. We got to play. We got to hang out with our family. We ate together. We cooked. We baked. We watched movies together. We laughed. My family played cards last night for several hours. And, I think what's going to happen is our perspective, our perception of this is really important. And I think, I've shared this illustration with some students before, and I'll finish with this as far as like what I want to share. But there was a lady who saw a cocoon on a tree, and she was thinking, oh, that's cool. And she brought it home. She put it in a glass jar, a mason jar, and she watched it. And soon she saw where the cocoon was struggling, and she could see a little opening where the butterfly was trying to come out. And she was excited. And she was trying to watch it and felt like it's struggling so much to get out of this cocoon. Maybe I should help it out a little bit. So what she does is she goes in and she just sort of opens the cocoon up a little bit so that the butterfly can get out easier. And soon the butterfly just sort of falls on the bottom of the glass jar and flops around, and shortly after that dies. And so she was confused. She was thinking, what is going on here? I thought, they live and they start flying as soon as they come out of the cocoon. And so she talked to somebody who at her university to say, hey, what is the deal here? Somebody that knew about those kinds of things, a bug doctor or whatever you call it, professor.
I don't know.
But the professor said this basically: the process of getting out of the cocoon is what builds the muscles in the wing to provide the opportunity for that butterfly to fly. Mm-hmm. If you rob the struggle from the butterfly, it won't fly.
Wow.
And I think for us, what we have to identify is we got to think, how can I purposefully live and serve and share the gospel during this time? I mean, we have opportunities to call people and connect with people that we've never talked to during the regular time, just to say, hey, I was just thinking about you. I have your phone number, or hey, let me message you on some social media platform, to just start a conversation and say, hey, do you mind if I share my story?
Right.
This could be a great opportunity for growth and for us to see God do a work of renewal and multiplication that we've never seen. The Great Commission could be, just take off during this time, because people start to think this is our purpose.
Right. So how are we using our time during this?
Yeah.
And like you sent out in our Baptist Collegiate Ministry group message, call 2 people a day, check up on people.
Yeah.
So I think we should take that, if you're listening, and take that and run with it.
Yeah.
And we encourage you to do that. Well, that's the end of it, Jeff.
Okay.
First episode, technically number 9, because I did 8 last year. But thank you again for letting us use the building. Everyone who's listening, thank you for checking us out. You can find more of our episodes that we've already done, and the future ones we will post on Apple and Spotify podcast at The Long Run Podcast. So just check that out. Also, all the episodes will be, if you don't have access to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it'll be at www.thelongrunpodcast.org. Thanks so much for listening.